This is Voluminous, a listening books podcast for every kind of reader, but especially for fans of audiobooks. I'm Jessica Stone, and today we're taking a deep dive into the world of literary prizes. On the 16th of October, the prestigious Man Booker Prize was awarded to Anna Burns for her novel Milkmen. The day before that, The Guardian's Not the Booker winner was also announced. That went to Rebecca Leigh for her novel Sweet Fruit, Sour Land. I sat down with the man behind the Not the Booker, The Guardian's delightful Sam Jordison, to talk about both prizes and the fun of disagreeing with judges' decisions. Well, thank you again, Sam, for coming over after a long day's work on a Monday to be with us.
It's my pleasure.
Could you start off by telling us what you do with The Guardian?
Yes, I do a few things. I run a kind of online book club called The Reading Group, which is tremendous fun. It's a really nice corner of the internet where I get to talk essentially, mainly about classic books, and we go over one a month and readers contribute. They have fantastic things to say about these brilliant novels. It's a real privilege to do this. Not many book journalists get to talk about books that have been around for a while, so it's really something I enjoy. I manage a section where readers send in their recommendations about their favourite books and what they've been reading recently, which again is really positive and really nice. And I help run a prize called the Not the Booker Prize.
That's right, you do, which is mainly why we're talking to you today. We're going to delve into that a bit more in a bit. But you were just telling me while we were doing our sound test that you used to be a film reviewer. So now I'm curious how you went from that to books.
I was a film reviewer. When I started out, I was very lucky. I started out being a film reviewer for film4.com, just at not quite in the .com boom, but still people were building things and setting things up. So I managed to get a job there when I was very young, and it was fantastic fun, and spent a couple of years getting a lot of experience and writing about films. But books was always my thing, really. I had vaguely literary ambitions like lots of young journalists. And I also started writing books, and I wrote a series of books called Crap Towns about the worst places to live in the UK, which went quite well, and I left film journalism to write those. And then my fourth book, I think it was called Bad Dates, which was about romantic encounters that had gone wrong. And I had this thing where when you have a book come out, it's an emotional experience. It's great. You know, you've worked really hard on it and you get to see the finished thing and hold it in your hands. It's lovely. But also, what happens next? And you have this terrible fear about your book going into the world and what more can I do to push it, really, because you've been working so hard on it. Suddenly, when it comes out, there's not much more you can do. And I realised I was going around bookshops and, checking where my book was in the shop and moving it forward and putting it in more prominent positions. But the fun thing was that I managed to get in touch with an editor at The Guardian and told her about this and, asked, do other authors do this? Would it be worth writing about? So I wrote something about that and then managed to keep on writing for them. And that was more than 10 years ago now.
So your piece about sort of surreptitiously moving things around to promote your own work in a bookshop is what then propelled you into
yeah, I managed to parlay that into my dream of doing book reviews. Yeah.
Well played. Well played. We asked you to join us today specifically because of The Guardian's Not the Booker Prize, which just turned 10 this year, didn't it?
Did turn 10, yeah. It's been quite a journey.
Well, I'm always interested in things that are defined by what they're not. So I'd like you to tell us how it began and what limitations of the Man Booker does the Not the Booker address.
I know it's called the Not the Booker, but it's not really there to criticise the Booker, because I actually am a big fan of the Booker. I think, I disagree with them quite often, but I enjoy disagreeing with them, and I think it's great that we have this conversation about books. And at The Guardian, I was actually writing a lot about the Booker Prize, about past Booker Prize winners and about people that were in contention. And they suggested to me that it would be good to do an alternative thing because there was a feeling that maybe certain kinds of books weren't getting through, and they're very good on the books desk at The Guardian at responding to readers, and readers were they always complain about the Booker Prize, which again is part of the fun. But, we wanted to give them something to, give them a say in a way and, see if we could enlist them to, well, not put their money where their mouth was because it didn't cost them anything, but, to see if they could do something different and interesting. And also, that was one of the ideas, and to get different kind of books than the feeling, there is a feeling that the Booker Prize is kind of the establishment and big publishers, and we wanted some of the edgier publishers that were starting to emerge to have a say in it. But the other thing was, it was quite meta in a way. We wanted to lay bare the process of how books are chosen for these prizes and to have an open conversation about the kind of discussions that happen behind the scenes on the Booker. So the classic thing with the Booker is the prize is awarded, the judges present a united front, everyone's happy, and then 10, 15 years later, people start talking about it and you learn they've had these fantastic fallings out and it was a very split decision and, someone will have threatened to resign if certain books were chosen. You realise nothing is as certain for a start as it seems when the book is given the prize. And it very much is, as Julian Barnes famously called it, posh bingo. And it's a bit of a lottery and it really depends on the jurors and, how they're feeling on the day almost can really make a difference about what's chosen. So we wanted to have that discussion out in the open and we wanted to make it fun and democratic. And the thing we can do really well at The Guardian is enlist people out in the world to write in and tell us about things and become involved in the process. So we wanted to have all those conversations in the open, enlist the readers and take it from there. And of course, those are a lot of slightly diffuse things. So over the 10 years, it's really been a long process of refining the process and working out what works and what brings us the best books.
Oh, that's interesting. So tell me, is there something you can think of that didn't work in the past that you refined to work better?
Yeah, things have changed over time as well. As people become more used to the prize, they have different expectations of it and people learn to game it in a way, I suppose. Especially early on, everything was open and people could just vote on the books and, it was pretty much one comment, one vote. And we noticed after a while that, certain publishers were pushing their books forward particularly, and social media was coming into play more and more, and people getting their Facebook friends to write in and sending out tweets about books, encouraging them to write in, which in a way is good, and it's democracy, and people have to canvass in a democracy, and it's part of the process. But we did get to a point when there would be some quite odd books landing on the shortlist. And there was one notorious occasion where a PR agency became involved, and there was a particularly dreadful book that made it onto the shortlist that was actually quite good fun because it was so awful and so offensively bad that the review I wrote, I was furious. And it really, I think it came across in the review and it became something people enjoyed reading it.
I'm going to have to dig this up. It
was spread around. Yeah, the book was by James Palumbo. James Palumbo was the guy who set up the Ministry of Sound. He's done lots of interesting things. Thomas, it was called. But the book was atrocious and, didn't deserve to be on any prize shortlist.
So how did you prevent that from happening again?
We have had all kinds of small incremental changes. We have a rule now that people have to send in nominations for 2 books by different publishers and that they have to write a review of the book they want to go forward. And we also have a panel of judges now who become involved in the process, and this is a really fun thing. So what happens is we have a big free-for-all where people name a huge long list, and then we have a vote on that, and we whittle things down to a short list.
And sorry, that whittling down, that's by public vote.
That's by public vote, yeah. There are slight complications, which are, it's complicated. So I'll try and explain those later. So we have the public vote on the long list, which produces a short list of 6 books, and then I review each of those in turn, going at roughly the rate of 1 a week. And then as I review them, people from the public can comment on those reviews and add their own thoughts, and quite a few people try and read along with me. And out of those people, the ones who comment most often and seem to have lots of interesting things to say about the books, we will select 3 of those. This is one of the hardest things, selecting them, because there are so many people who write fantastic things. We select 3 of those people to become judges, and they have a part in the next round, which is when we decide on the winner, which is also partly decided by public vote and partly decided by the judges. And then to add a further complication, the judges also select a book the following year. So one of the books on the shortlist is actually chosen by the judges.
Oh, that's right. You call that the wild card.
The wild card, yeah.
I like that element.
I like that too. And the book they chose this year, Mark Nash's Three Songs in the Key of G was...
Three Dreams
in the Key of G.
That's
right. Three Dreams in the Key of G was really interesting. I thought it was a very unusual book and wouldn't have had much attention, I don't think, in the press or anywhere else. Among certain aficionados, it would. So it was really good that got some coverage. I was really pleased about that.
Has the wild card ever won?
The wild card has not won yet. So that'd
be a real upset.
That would be a real upset. Yeah, it would. So this year there was an upset because the winner of the public vote, that was overturned by the judges. So the public vote winner gets 2 votes in the final round. Are you still with me?
Oh, I am.
Okay.
I am.
And then the judges get 1 vote each, and there are 3 judges.
Yes.
So they get 3 votes. So if one judge goes along with the public vote, that's it, it's done now. But if all 3 judges don't go with the public vote, then it gets interesting and it becomes down to the judges' vote. And this time 3 judges got behind one book, which went on to win.
Were they able to discuss this beforehand amongst each other, or had they independently come to that conclusion?
They do have some discussion.
Okay.
And I discussed things with them, but I didn't know they were going to do this. And I don't think they did until the last minute. So it came as a big surprise to me as well.
Well, yes, because not only did they overturn the winner of the popular vote, those 2 votes from the public, but it's actually fairly in the middle of the rankings in terms of the public voting. I mean, the top 3 are nowhere near the rest of them, and it wasn't in the top 3 according to the public voting. I found that really interesting.
That was interesting, and it was a brave decision by them to go against the public vote so strongly, and I wasn't expecting them to do that. I was expecting another book to come through, but I think actually...
Oh, which one did you expect to come through?
Well, can I name it? This is the...
I mean, I was going to ask you for your favourite one to win was anyway.
Yeah.
Are they one and the same? The one you expected to come through and the one that was your favourite?
I think possibly Mark Nash's. I didn't...
the wild card.
Yeah, I didn't like it particularly. I didn't enjoy reading it, but I found it so interestingly challenging that I think that probably would have been the one I voted for.
That's really interesting now. That a book that you don't actually necessarily like or warm to, it still impresses you that much.
Yeah, you don't have to like art to appreciate it, I don't think. And I respected what he was doing, and I think he fulfilled his intentions and did them well, and it was very clever. So it wasn't easy entertainment, but it was something worthwhile. So yeah, it's very interesting, and it's an interesting one for me as well because I'm a publisher and I publish things mainly out of passion, so things I love. And I don't think I would have published that book, but I'm glad that someone else did. Anyway, I've gone on a big circle to return to your question. The one I thought the judges might go for, which had done well in the public vote, was Sealed by Naomi Booth, which was a really interesting book, and I liked that myself. So maybe I was kind of hoping they would go for that.
It did well in the public vote as well. I think it was only a few votes shy. It came within 3 votes of winning the public vote.
Yeah.
So it would have been possibly a more popular
It might
decision.
have been. Yeah, it would have been less controversial maybe.
I know they say not to read the comments, and I did anyway. And there was a bit of griping that if you were only going to overturn the public vote anyway, why did you ask us? But I actually really like the way you've done it with the 3 judges and then the popular vote, because as you say, the popular vote can be gamed. Mm-hmm. The 3 judges, are they committed then to reading the entire shortlist?
Yeah, they have read the whole shortlist, and they've earned their position.
Yes.
So they've commented throughout the process and said interesting things about the book and thought hard about them. So they've earned their place on that panel. And
absolutely.
So if they want to overturn it, it's up to them. And it's a brave decision on their part, but it's their choice. So I thought respect to the judges.
And as you say, disagreeing even passionately is part of the fun of these sorts of literary prizes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and when you're in the thick of it and everyone's getting really passionate about it, and it does start to seem very important. But of course, you've got to remember it's for fun. And essentially the prize, especially on the Not the Book or on the Guardian, the prize is a Guardian mug. And
wait a minute, that's all I have to do to get a Guardian mug is write an amazing book that loads of people like.
Yes, that's it. It's pretty easy. So there you go, and get through some difficult rounds of public voting and have the judges on your side, and then you're there. You'll have another nice mug for your collection.
You had said that one of the aims of the Not the Booker Prize was to put in front of the public the sorts of books that may not make the Man Booker long list even. Can you tell me about what the difference is between...
Yes, it's very hard to define. I think the first thing to say is you never quite know what's going to be on the Man Booker long list, because every year it's different and there's a different set of judges and they have different tastes. So you could never quite predict that. But I think the issue I perhaps have with the Man Booker, much as I love it, is that it's dominated by big publishers essentially, and the rules are constructed in a way that gives them better access to the prize because they are able to actually put more books forward for consideration than smaller publishers.
I don't think I realised that. Is that because they just have different imprints in each of those?
To a certain extent, it's because of different imprints, and also because past winners are able to put more books forward, which kind of creates you could call it a virtuous circle, or or a kind of domino effect, and makes it difficult for punkier, newer publishers to get considered or to get the same number of books considered. So I think that's maybe one difference, is that the Not the Booker is more open to everyone, and things aren't quite so stacked against the little guys. There's also a feeling, I'm not sure, I'm not going to cast too many aspersions on the Booker, but often the choices they go for feel quite safe and quite staid and not particularly challenging. In fact, this year is a really interesting case because the winner was described as, with scare quotes, challenging, and that became a big controversial thing. And I think, firstly, it's problematic that the winner was described as challenging, because I don't think that book, I haven't read it, but I've looked at a bit of it. I don't think challenging would be the first word I'd use to describe. There are all kinds of other things you can say about it, and it sounds like a fantastic book as far as I can tell, but it also doesn't seem difficult, really. I've seen much more difficult books.
You've published more
I've
difficult
published
books,
more difficult books. And so this is one of my philosophical things as a publisher, is that no book is too hard. If I can understand it as an editor, there are going to be people out there who can understand it. You have to respect readers, and you can throw things at them, and if the book is good, they will go for it. I mean, look at the books that last in posterity. The Wasteland would perhaps be called, scare quotes, challenging now, but okay.
Yeah, I think it probably still is.
Yeah, but it's worth reading, and it stood the test of time, and it's important, and it's brilliant, and it's rewarding, and there are all kinds of other important things to say about it. And Virginia Woolf, these challenging, To the Lighthouse, it takes a while to get used to learn how to read that almost, but it's this beautiful, incredible, enlightening, enriching book full of amazing epiphanies and descriptions, and it changes your life reading a book like that, and so you should engage with them. What I'm saying is that you shouldn't regard a book being challenging as a hurdle, and there are other more important things to say about books. And so when a book is described as challenging, but that's come out of the Booker process, and it's the first thing that people say about it, it's a bit of an issue, because the first thing that people should be saying is it's an amazing book, or maybe it's not, and discussing it in those terms.
I feel like quite often it seems as if there's a group of readers who maybe resent the Man Booker for choosing perhaps more difficult or more challenging books because they feel like it doesn't validate their own taste in reading. And at the same time, there's another group that can perhaps be a little bit too finger wagging to the others about what they should be reading, or whether their reading is sufficiently literary. And it feels like that's that's a fairly constant tension going on.
Yeah, I think it's a shame that it's a tension. I really think it should be about which is the best book. And one year that might be, obviously it's not going to be, but a Hemingway book, which is very clear and superficially at least very easy to read and short declarative sentences, and you can whiz through it should you choose to. Obviously you'll find incredible depths and difficulties within Hemingway if you want to, but a great rollicking story well told can win and be the best book, and so can a book by James Joyce if we're going back to the 1920s. Ulysses, also absolutely brilliant, but perhaps more...
I mean, if we're talking about effort required of the reader, that's up there on the scale for sure.
Yeah. And Finnegan's Wake, I would argue, probably shouldn't win because it's got to the point where maybe some people can get something from it, but is it the best book? I'm not sure. So you'd have that kind of discussion. But Ulysses, come on, it's brilliant, so it's got to win. So where am I going with this? So what I'm saying is, a John le Carré book, he doesn't allow his books to be put into contention for the Booker Prize, but I could, if a John le Carré book won, I'd be like, great, he's brilliant, and it's easy to read and you can whiz through it, but it's still a very, very good book, and that's what discussion should be about. And to bring my own personal biases in, the kind of books we publish at Gallybeggar Press, I feel... Obviously, you will have to take this with a pinch of salt because I'm very passionate about my books. But for instance, this year we published a book called Lucia by Alex Phoebe, and I'm convinced that this is a masterpiece, is going to last down the ages, and people are going to be asking, why wasn't it even shortlisted for the Booker Prize? And it's not an easy book. It's emotionally difficult, and as a reader, you have to work hard sometimes, and it takes your mind to strange places, and it's got a fractured narrative, and that doesn't matter because it's brilliant and it should have been in contention, I feel. And I think I do worry that there might have been a conversation where they said, well, it's too difficult for people, and it's not. No one who has read the book, a few people have maybe it's gone past them and they've misunderstood it and they haven't got everything they wanted it from it in as far as the reviews have gone. But we get a lot of feedback from readers saying, I worked with the book and it's been an overwhelming and beautiful, disturbing, incredible experience. So I've gone a long way from your question, but my point is it should just be about the best book, not whether a book is difficult, not whether it's easy, just whether it's good.
I think the question that started us off down this path was how the shortlist of, say, the Not the Booker differs from that of the Man Booker. And would you say that it varies in its level of, if we're going to use the word challenge, or is that one way in which it differs? Okay,
I'm going to completely obliterate the last 10 minutes of conversation there and say, I'm not sure if they're more challenging. I think actually this year we had a really challenging book, which we've already spoken about, Mark Nash's 3 Dreams in the Key of G. So that was a very unusual book for to get any kind of coverage at all in the press. And that was really challenging. And I think some of the books perhaps are more challenging, but the fun thing about the Not the Booker is we just don't know what we're going to get every year. So it could be anything. And there's the potential for a really challenging book. And most years we have had something that's been interesting and difficult. But we also get quite a few crime books, for instance, because crime books have passionate readers and passionate early readers because of the way they send them out to lots of book clubs for review and lots of online reviewers, so they get involved, and so quite a few crime books come in, and there can be difficult crime books, but quite often they follow a formula and are more easy to read. So we get both sides of the coin, I guess. Yeah.
Do you have any favourites from the past 10 years? Any favourite winners?
I have a lot of favourites. Actually, there have been some really good winners. King Crow by Michael Stewart was one of the early winners, which was fantastic. A really unusual book. In fact, was it a difficult one? I'm not sure. It was certainly different and unlike anything else I'd read, which is really interesting. And there have been some amazing books that have made the shortlist that haven't won. So Man with a Seagull on His Head by Harriet Page from last year was a real gem, a book I just hadn't heard of. And I don't think many people had it. It actually had some coverage in the Guardian, Claire Armistead had spotted it and written something about how good it was. She is my editor, so I was really pleased. I really liked a book that she liked. But it was it was beautiful and really, really fun to read, and full of fantastic ideas about art and mortality and what it means to create art. It was really thoughtful but really well written, lovely, clear sentences. You got straight to the heart of the book really quickly. That was fantastic.
I'm going to look that up. Tell me that one again.
So, Man with a Seagull on His Head by Harriet Page. I think I got the title right.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I'm really pleased, partly thanks to the Not the Booker. It also got sold in America, and it's come out there with a really good publisher called Biblioasis, and it's had fantastic reviews over in the States. So it's doing well. So
good work.
Yeah.
I think the only I was just looking back at past winners of Not the Booker, and I think the only one that I had read was Kate Atkinson's Life After Life,
right,
which was hugely popular, but I think deservedly so. It was not a book that I expected to enjoy as much as I did, to be honest. And that's no slight on Kate Atkinson. That's because the idea of a story that restarts itself over and over and over again sounded to me like that could very quickly be tedious, but it wasn't. It was new each time, I thought.
Well, I had mixed feelings about that book. It was a popular choice. Loads of people really liked it. Judges liked it. Lots of the public loved it.
Yeah.
It has passionate readers who really like it. I think she's a fantastic writer. Beautiful sentences. She can just set them down. They flow really well. But I actually thought that the time travel idea was a bit of a gimmick. So one of the central conceits of the book was, what happens if someone goes back and kills Hitler, essentially, and which has been done before. And it felt tired to me, and I wasn't impressed. And
okay.
I thought I've seen most of those before.
I expected it to feel tired, and it didn't feel that way to me.
It did to me. And I also thought there were lots of logical inconsistencies, and I kept worrying, if this happened, why didn't this happen? This doesn't add up. And so I had problems with it, but I know I'm in a minority there. From
the reviews I've read of yours, I do think you keep up with logistics if they're not adding up.
Yeah. So I'm an editor as well at my publisher, and perhaps I have a mind that works is attuned to these things in a particular way, and they stick out to me more than they do to other people, possibly.
Well, and also you're a writer, and I know from my other friends who are writers, and I am not, and I don't mean just that I'm not published. I don't identify as a writer at all. But the friends that I know who are, I have asked some of them if it has kind of ruined some books for them. And it absolutely has, because they read it in a critical way that I think those of us who are not reading it as a writer or as an editor, as you say, don't. I don't think it's that I'm not thinking about what I'm reading. It's not that I'm not engaging critical thinking, but I'm not measuring or keeping up with certain things the same way a writer or editor would.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. And I think that's valid. Everyone's reading experience is different. Everyone reads a different book. And if the book you read works for you, great. I'm happy, essentially. And I think it's a really interesting thing that once the book is out there, it becomes a different thing. And everyone, every single person that reads it has a different experience of the book. That's one of the exciting things about being a writer and a publisher, knowing it's going to go out there and have all these new lives in a way that are often different to the way the writers have imagined it as well. So one of the things I think writers find painful is when people review their books and they think they feel that reviewers have misunderstood things or got things wrong or have seen things in the books that aren't there. But I don't think that's what it is. I think reviewers spot things in the books that maybe writers aren't aware of. They don't quite know they've done, or sometimes I feel maybe reviewers do get things wrong, but other times I think it's just a different interpretation of the same thing, which is really interesting and a fascinating part of the process. And I sometimes, I've even said to writers, look at that in 5 years and see what you think, and maybe they'll see it in a different way. And it's a really interesting thing when you read writers who've been around for a while, and they sometimes talk about, I did this book and thought it was about this, but actually it was about that. And
that's really interesting, yeah, because if you're trying to read something to determine what the author is intending, but the author actually doesn't really know that until much later
Yeah,
as well. I don't know.
it is interesting. And I think authors go through the same kind of process where when they read the book in a few years' time, it's a different book for them as well. So they reinterpret it and realign it in new ways.
I like what you said there about it being a different experience, that every reading of a book is a different experience with a different reader. If we could talk just briefly about the man booker.
Sure.
I know that one of the women in my library book group would always say that she liked to know who'd won the booker so she could know what to avoid. I think she felt that way about all literary prizes, to be honest. I don't share her feelings on the matter. I'm much more likely to pay attention to it in order to add to my list of things I ought to read. But I do kind of understand the reluctance there, or the kind of wariness of, I think it's a wariness of pretentiousness, to be honest. Perceived pretentiousness.
Okay. I think, I use the word pretentious myself sometimes, but I always kick myself afterwards because I don't think it's right. If people are trying to do something, we shouldn't assume they're trying to show off and they're trying to get one over on everyone else by being clever. I think not many people set about, some people do obviously, but not many people, it's not their intention. If you're going to put writers pour an awful lot into their books, and showing off is not their intention well, it is in a way because they want to impress people with the book, but it's not about trying to say I'm clever. It's about trying to say something genuine. And if you don't get it at first, I think that's probably more to do with you than with the writer. And it might be worth going back and having a look, and you might find something that actually really moves you and really engages you and makes you think about things in a new way. To come back to your friend who avoids the Booker Prize, she's avoided Moon Tiger by Penelope Lively, for instance, which is one of the most brilliant books I've ever read. It's funny. It's really, really moving. It's a really touching story of lost love. It's really evocative of the Second World War, for instance. There are some incredible scenes in the desert in Egypt that just seem, like you're in amongst it. You feel like you're out there in the heat and the sand, and you can feel the danger, and it's exciting. It's an experience you live, and then there are these incredible characters who are funny and cruel and who have fantastic theories about history, and you feel like you're almost arguing with especially the most important character in the book. It's an incredible experience, and why would you deny that to yourself? Because you have this idea that the prize might be pretentious. It just seems a shame that you're missing out on such it's luxury reading a book like that. It's a wonderful experience.
That is lovely. Of course, as you say that, I think to myself, it just reminds me that despairing thought of all the books that I will undoubtedly have not read by the time my life has ended, and how many of them would be wonderful, amazing books, and suddenly I feel prematurely deprived.
Yeah, that is a depressing thought. In fact, I was recently reading an article about to read piles and, the big list of books you have that you want to read. But, especially as a book reviewer, I'm sent loads of books. Every week they come through the post, and I'm kind of, my heart does sink, like, oh God, another one's landed on the doormat. I've got to get that out of the house. But I imagine myself dying. If anyone's read Howard's End, there's a brilliant scene at the end when the character Leonard Bast, who, like me, is kind of the lower middle class person with aspirations to literary grandeur, and he's killed by a pile of bookshelves essentially fall on him in a very symbolic way. Anyway, so I look at my to-read piles and think, oh God, I'm going to go like Leonard Bast with all these books that I haven't read cascading on me. And
there are worse ways.
There are worse ways. And, there's also like you say, the depressing thought that you will never get through all these books. But then I guess the flip side of that is there are an awful lot of books you're going to enjoy reading, and you're going to have some great reading experiences, and go for it and dig in, and who knows what you'll find in there.
So my producer here has just chimed in to ask how often you get to read just for leisure.
Oh, never. No, that's not entirely true. So what can I tell you? I'm very often reading manuscripts for Gallibegger Press, my publisher. So I'm reading things that, we're considering taking on maybe. I'm reading the books I'm editing, I'm reading the books I'm reviewing, and I'm reading the books for my online book club, the reading group at The Guardian. So
I'm exhausted already.
that's a lot of reading. But I do sometimes pick up other things and enjoy going through them. And the secret, in fact, is audiobooks. So I have a dog, I walk the dog. And, that's and more than an hour a day where quite often I listen to podcasts, but I also have a good audiobook on the go. And so recently I've been reading, or I have been listening to, lots of books by Charles Dickens, which has just been a treat. And they work so well as audiobooks. It's been just a lovely experience.
That's so great. We're doing it. We're doing an episode on Dickens' work a little bit later on in the series. And I think that'll be our Christmas episode, but it's such a, not even just the Christmas related stories, but for some reason his works are so comforting to return to, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. And I think you can just, those great big sentences you can sink into like a huge sofa, but they're, the characters who you're waiting to jump out of the page from you. I mean, the one I always think of is Betsy Trotwood and David Copperfield. And I just want to cheer every time she appears on the scene. I absolutely love her. And he's so good at that kind of thing. But of course, there's everything in Dickens, and there are, very sad moments and everything else. You get the full emotional roller coaster. It's great. Yeah.
Speaking of audiobooks, and because I haven't asked you this yet, and since we are talking about not the Booker and therefore the Man Booker, the winner of this year's Man Booker, Anna Burns' Milkman, have you had a chance to read that yet?
I have not. So I've seen it, I've leafed over it in a bookshop and I've read some interviews with her. And she comes across really well. She sounds great. She talks about writing really thoughtfully and about the struggle to write. And obviously she's had challenges in her life, and putting this book together has been a process, and getting it published. And so she seems fantastic. And it sounds actually like a really interesting book, so I want to read it, but as we've just outlined, it's not always easy for me to make the time. So hopefully one day I will read it.
Well, the reason I brought it up in connection with audiobooks is because I heard on the Guardian Books podcast actually that it was a book that rewarded both rereading and listening to, and I think because it's written in one voice and in a Northern Irish dialect, that actually it could be really fun to listen to as an audiobook. That would be.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be. Yeah, I'm sure that would work. And talking of Irish dialect, we were talking about James Joyce before, and the difficulties he presents, but there's a really good audiobook of Ulysses.
And that is definitely the way to experience it, I think.
Yeah, it makes it easier and it makes it fun, and you really hear the Dublin.
Yeah, and it's meant to be fun. This is the thing. Okay, yes, it does require perhaps a bit more effort from the reader, but it's bawdy, and it's meant to be a bit more fun and a bit more rollicking than I think people often.
Yeah, that's right. The secret of Ulysses is just a series of bum jokes, really, isn't it? It's just every page is a gag about farting or something.
Yeah. Now, you made a great case for why we should definitely read the likes of the Man Booker winners and shortlisted books, and how we shouldn't feel as though the word challenging should be off-putting, that we should get beyond that for what awaits beyond that. But I know as well that you as a writer, I think you said that the stuff that you write isn't necessarily always at that elevated level. Can you tell us a bit about what you write?
Yes, I'd love to. So my most recent book is called The 10 Worst of Everything, which I think is probably pretty self-explanatory. It's a series of top 10, is top 10 the right word? Bottom 10 lists of the worst of. So it starts off with things in nature, the things that are most likely to kill you, the most poisonous animals and the best hunters, which was really fun to write and find out about. And blue whales, man, don't mess with blue whales was the conclusion I came to.
Don't mess with blue whales.
They're the ones who kind of kill great white sharks for fun, and great white sharks are tough enough. So there's all those kinds of things, and then it goes on to pop music and, you know, the worst duets, which were all from the 1980s. And, you know, the most dangerous things in the household. I tried to be as comprehensive as I could be, and some of it is hopefully genuinely informative. So there's a few travel sections about, you know, places you might not want to go and dangers. But some of it is there because of the cheap gags. No, the expensive gags. They were a lot of thought. So what I'm particularly pleased with that I wrote with my daughter, who was 10, is the worst vegetables. So she just named the vegetable she dislikes the least.
I see. I want to hear that list. I want to read that list.
Yeah, the food section was really good fun, actually. So I looked at the most expensive foods. There's some completely ridiculous things, you know, food with diamonds in it, and just wow, but also quite repulsive and kind of ostentatiously.
Well, that was what that wow meant.
And the most disgusting food. Shall I tell you about the most disgusting?
Go on. Yeah.
So there are some astonishing things in the top 10 disgusting foods, but the number one is something, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right. It's an Icelandic dish called harkal, and it's a kind of fermented shark. And this shark sounds disgusting when it's alive, and it is full of uric acid and another kind of poison that has to be, before you can eat it, it's got to go through a process to get rid of those. And that process is essentially burying it for like 3 months and just leaving it to ferment and rot, essentially, and then hanging it up for another month so a nice kind of crust grows on it, and you get this kind of absolutely repulsive thing. And the idea is you have this, I think it's kind of a test of manhood, or, you know, you have this really strong local spirit that you knock back one of those and then have a mouthful and knock back more of the spirit, and, you know, if you're tough enough you can do it. But there are great videos you can look up on YouTube, which I suggest caution before you do, because essentially it's just people chundering. There's a really good one of Gordon Ramsay who gives it his best, kind of tries a bit, and then it's all out.
It has been such a pleasure. Is there anything else that you've just been dying to talk about?
I think I do want to say one thing, actually, because I have been talking a lot about, you know, the importance of challenging yourself, and of course, I agree with myself, but I do want to say, you know, reading, there's nothing wrong with enjoying it as well. And you shouldn't feel bad about tucking into, I don't know, an Agatha Christie or a really good crime book, a thriller. And, you know, that too is a really valid reading experience. And I think I wanted to say that, you know, books that are entertaining can also be really good and deserve to get prizes. But even books that maybe aren't of great literary weight, they have their value, and if you're enjoying them, that in itself is worth something.
I'm glad you said that. Thank you so much, Sam.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Isn't he delightful? I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I definitely added a few titles to my reading list. Congratulations to Anna Burns for winning this year's Man Booker with Milkman, and congratulations to Rebecca Lay for winning the Guardian's Not the Booker for her book Sweet Fruit, Sour Land. If you have strong opinions about either prize, and remember, that's part of the fun, we'd love to hear from you. Actually, we'd love to hear from you anyway. You can tweet us at Listening Books or leave us a review wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Listening Books. We have 2 episodes left in this series, and they are going to be so much fun. I can't wait to share them with you. So if you like this podcast, make sure you're subscribed, whether through Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get them. And then maybe share it with someone who might also enjoy it. Next time, we'll be getting into the holiday spirit with a couple of Listening Book staffers about our favourite kinds of books to turn to throughout the festive season. The Luminous is produced by Listening Books, a UK charity providing audiobooks for people who have difficulty reading print, whether that's because of illness, disability, learning, or mental health. If that's you or someone you know, you can find out how to access our more than 7,500 titles including lots of literary prize winners, by heading to listening-books.org.uk.